The very first thing I said 3 years ago when I was asked into the Senate Intelligence Committee SCIF, the Secure Compartment Information Facility, for the top investigators for that committee, I said, you see these objects moving like they were released a few years ago that, you know, our F-18 Hornet pilots were chasing? That's ours. But look, there's no heat signature. There's no rocket. There's no jets. There's no nuclear power plant on board, which of course would be very hot because the heat sensor showed no heat, no propulsion. What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with electromagnetic field propulsion and so-called zero-point energy or quantum vacuum energy. Now, when that is disclosed, it means that, well, it'll take us 15 or 20 years, but we would transition into a civilization without pollution, without poverty, where everybody would have free energy. Your truck, instead of spending $100 to fill up your F-150, would cost zero because it would never even have to be plugged in. A Tesla wouldn't be plugged into the power grid, which is fossil fuel, and which costs you money. It would be generating energy from the space around it. It's called the quantum vacuum or zero point. So that was mastered, and that was discovered a long time ago. We have another documentary you can see called The Lost Century that unpacks that whole history of 100 years of lost technology. But the people who want to maintain the status quo of the current control system, how the masses and how the population is controlled. So weather,
and by the way, just interrupt,
weather engineering is, you know, part of that, but the technologies that allow for one thing allow for many others.
I was just using the weather control, how it's going on, and how they keep it secret and just say, oh, you're conspiracy theorists, but then they treat us like little kids at Thanksgiving at the little kid table. They're at the big kid table on C-SPAN admitting it all, like the CIA director. I was just using that as an example of how, I mean, obviously that's lower in the crown jewels hierarchy. It's just another example of a whole secret project.
But they're also, it's a bit like Dr. Strangelove. You have some of these enormous scientific breakthroughs in the hands of madmen.
That's what I call the globalists, as a cult of mad scientists.
They're crazy, and I know a number of them, quite frankly. And you know, these are the people that need to be subpoenaed. So one of the things I said to Congressman Burchett when they were wanting to do these investigations, House oversight, I said, you can't do anything without subpoena. You can't do anything without a select committee that is funded with proper research. But you know what? Every time that comes up, there are people in the Congress that block it.
Who are in on it, like
yes,
Lindsey Graham. So but just for describe then.
No, there are House committee chairmen last year in December of 2023 that deliberately blocked the Senate bill that allowed for amnesty and a lot of this to go forward.
Sure, they don't want people to be able to talk about all this shit.
So let's go to lesson number 2. Lesson number 2 is take if we had a map of the world right here, take all the geopolitical lines between China, Mongolia, you know, Germany and France, Canada and the United States, erase them. This organization operates transnationally. That's why I don't call it international. International is U.S. to France or whatever. It's a transnational corrupt organization, not a conspiracy theory here. This is a fact. It operates globally. And, you know, even, you know, a Democratic Senator Inouye back in during the 80s said there exists a shadow secret government with its own Air Force, its own funding mechanism, and its own that's above the law and free from the law itself. And
we've seen an emergence of its consortium of political and financial control with Larry Fink of BlackRock, and that's just a front name for all those groups with 80+% of world control of assets, saying we're going to control behavior with our corporate governance of ESG. And yeah.
Right, but the big crown jewel of that is they can't do that unless they keep secret the UFO issue. Because basically a UFO is a misnomer. It's not unidentified, it doesn't fly conventionally, and it's not, well, it's an object, that's about it. But the truth is that it's an alternative energy and propulsion device. Now, in the executive order you have in front of you here for the president, you will see that we recommend that there be a review process of those technologies once they get access to them. I don't think the administration has anything near access yet.
And how would Trump do that? He would form a task force with his own people, in Congress?
Well, let me explain that. This has already been mapped out, and it's in the executive orders. So let's go through this carefully. The president's going to have to issue executive orders authorizing, first of all, the investigation. They're going to have to authorize amnesty and protection for these high-value whistleblowers who want to come forward, who have all the goods and the evidence and everything else that I'm working with. They're then going to have to set up a task force and authorize law enforcement and a strike team to basically stand down the illegal operations. And
that's right. This is a long-term dug-in coup. You're going to have some action.
It isn't going to happen through wishful thinking, and it's going to take some, excuse my language, some brass balls to do it, because the aggregate power of that organization is much greater than the entire legal government of the United States.
I agree. You call it a criminal transnational organization. BlackRock's just one component of it that has more money than China and the U.S. combined. And you know, as you said, and they've been operating however they want forever.
The other thing is, if you want to have a whole new golden age, you're going to have to deal with this issue, because 8 billion people, if they started living like you and I do with air conditioning and all the comforts we have, the price of a gallon of gas would be $300. I mean, because right now there are 3 billion people that don't even have energy to cook their food. So it's going to be a transition. I tell oil and gas people, many of who support what we're recommending, that this will be a 15, 20-year transition. But it's not like an app you download in 2 seconds. It's a heavy industry. But think of the jobs it would create. We're talking a whole new economy. We're talking a civilization.
Well, Trump said this 2 weeks ago. He said, I don't want to just increase.
And we're talking about the ability to start a civilization that's sustainable and that is, you know, humane for all of humanity. I mean, it's a very. I was on Chad Rubin's show, and he's a very devout Christian, and we were talking about it from a humane Christian point of view.
Peace on earth.
Of peace on earth, but also how are you going to have peace on earth if the system we have is sort of an enforced slavery system where half the world's population
artificial scarcity
is artificially in terrible poverty. That breeds radicalism, terrorism, endless war.
Well, Trump said 2 weeks ago, he said, I don't want to just cut U.S. energy costs for us. He said, I want to flood the world with cheap energy to make everybody happy and lower crime and war. He understands that equation, that free energy does create peace.
Yeah, but free energy is not in a classified black box that currently the president doesn't have access to. This is the point.
So this is the holy grail to get this.
This is the holy grail. We know where
and we know, seeing these craft with no signature and all of this, this is another technology.
Right, and since the government has confirmed those are real 3D objects, and now there are people coming forward, even David Fravor had a Lockheed executive say to him, and he was the pilot for the F-18 Hornet that took that footage, right, of the Tic Tac, has admitted that that was a Lockheed object. So the head of Lockheed Skunk Works before he died, Ben Rich, told us that if you go out in the desert, not Area 51, but the Lockheed Skunk Works facilities underground, everything you can imagine. If you've seen Star Trek, they'd already done it at the Lockheed Skunk Works. We have it, and it would start a whole new civilization. But the global powers want to keep that secret. Now, here's what I think should be kept secret. I think anything that flies can be turned into a missile delivery system by a terrorist. That stays secret. And this is what we're recommending. And I've heard that the new intelligence directors around Trump are recommending.
Well, I was about to say, this isn't just disruptive technology. This is Atlantean power. And if it's...
but this thing that has to come out, and should have come out 100 years ago, is what Nikola Tesla, the actual Tesla, not the car Tesla, had. You know, he had a car in 1920, had an antenna on it that was rectifying all the electromagnetic field energy fluxing around the Earth, never had to be plugged in. It just had a little battery.